What's up, movie lover badasses? Lady Fat Blood here in a solo outing. Holy shit, what's going on? Fat Samurai Guy and I recently saw Star Trek Beyond, and where he enjoys Star Trek, we both, mostly him, but we both thought it would probably be okay if I went ahead and jumped in headfirst on this one. I am a huge classic Trek fan. Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan is my favorite film of all time. Don't you judge me. I saw it when I was really young, and I was probably maybe 6 or 7 years old. I was a little too young to understand all of the dialogue, all of the big adult words, but at the end of the day, what really struck me was how much I did understand the basics, the good versus evil, the life and death sacrifice, and the sadness by the end of the film of losing their comrade in Captain Spock. And the movie just kind of stuck with me through the years, and the older I got and the more I understood of what all was going on, and then I began to learn the history of Star Trek and where the Wrath of Khan came from in the original series Space Seed, I started to just love the film even more, and I developed a true love for the original series and their films. That includes the motion picture and Star Trek V. Don't ask. Please, just don't. So, back in 2009, when the reboot of Star Trek came out, I had been listening here and there, especially my cousin, who is equally a huge Star Trek fan, literally had to drag me kicking and screaming into the theater to go see it, because as far as I was concerned, my Trek was gone. Trek is dead, you know, it's not gonna come back, and you don't screw with my classic Trek. And that's exactly what they did. They took all of the existing characters that I knew and loved and were rebooting them, and as far as I was concerned, no, screw you. There's no way in hell that you are going to mess with my timeline, mess with my memories, give me this whole rebooted franchise with characters that I already know. And I wasn't interested in it at all. So, having said that, after I came out of the theater, what I noticed that they did very well, and this continued throughout the franchise, was for this new rebooted series, they did a good job of bringing it to a new audience while simultaneously not alienating the old farts like myself. And they did that with a very clever device of using Ambassador Spock, the character played by Leonard Nimoy. And basically, if you look at it through a fan's eyes like mine, we are Spock. We have gone through this timeline, and through all these circumstances, we have gone back in time with him, and now we have started a new alternate timeline. Because of the existence of Ambassador Spock throughout this series, it gave us that link and that connection to that thought that yes, this did happen. It didn't change anything. We lived it, we saw it, and now it's time to move on. They continued this through Star Trek Into Darkness. Now, the funny thing about Into Darkness is that, was it a ripoff of Wrath of Khan? Yeah, in a lot of ways, yeah. Do I forgive it because of its nature of being part of a rebooted franchise? Yes, and here's why. If you look at it from the perspective of the timeline has been completely altered because of the events that happened in the first film, with Nero's ship going back in time, setting this chain of events into action, he destroyed all of Vulcan. There are literally maybe 10,000, I think that was the approximate number, out of 6 or 7 billion people, 10,000 Vulcans now remain in this timeline. It sets off the character of Peter Weller into his foray into madness and creating this new super duper uber fighting battleship, and it would change the way certain people think and perceive on their safety in this universe. And so in this aspect, does it make sense that Benedict Cumberbatch is playing Khan, who's now British? No. Did he replace or do a better job than Ricardo Montalban? No, of course not. Ricardo Montalban was Khan. End of story, okay? But it just didn't bother me. When you get a package like this new franchise that's slick, which I don't really like things for the sake of being slick, but I understand what they're there for. They're there to bring an old property to a new audience. And as a fan of the old Trek, I was simply able to accept Into Darkness for what it was. Despite the ending kind of falling off the rails for me, with Spock yelling Khan, that I laughed in the theater, I'm not gonna lie. That was probably the most ridiculous point in that film. But I was convinced after the first movie in 2009 that that was it, because we never really seemed to hear anything about it after that. Oh, there's gonna be a sequel, there's gonna be a sequel. Okay, well, 4 years later, we finally got our sequel. And then J.J. Abrams, after Into Darkness, announced that he was crossing that border that you simply do not cross, and he was going to direct episode 7. And at that point I figured, okay, the rebooted franchise for Trek is officially dead. You can't jump ship. You can't change directors like that. You know, the old movies, they got away with different directors because it was just something that was done back in the day. But now, you know, you get different directors for franchises, but sometimes it's nice to have that cohesion. And I felt Abrams brought a good cohesion, a good energy, a good sense of character balance to the franchise. And I was really nervous that we were going to lose all of that in the third film. Especially hearing about how many different directors changed hands and were helming this Star Trek, this third film. Now, I'm not a fan of the Fast and Furious franchise, but I had heard of Justin Lin because of his last film, which was probably one of the most ridiculous sounding things I'd ever heard plot-wise, and people describing what's going on. It just sounds, the movie sounds ridiculous. But anyway, so hearing that he was being brought in to direct this third film, it kind of put me off a bit. I already felt like Trek was rebooted and altered enough to suit newer audiences. I felt getting somebody who had directed what was the equivalent of a superhero film without superheroes in the last Fast and Furious installment, I really didn't know how that was going to translate into Trek. You know, Star Trek's 50th anniversary was coming up. It didn't seem like Paramount really gave a shit about it. And the more I was hearing about the production and the rewrites and the reshoots, and it just sounded like it was going to be a disaster. So, needless to say, I was not looking forward to this third installment. Having enjoyed the first one, with the exception of the weak villain, and having enjoyed the second film very much, even though it was a ripoff of my favorite film of all time and the ending completely fell apart at the seams for me, how did the third one stack up with all of these issues that apparently was plaguing it behind the scenes? Pretty damn good. First of all, the character of Jayla, really nice addition to the cast. Her character was very spunky, very capable. She was actually a really good addition. She helped the plot along. She was involved with the characters. She had a really good backstory and nice little character arc in the film. The villain. How was the villain this time around? Well, Idris Elba plays the villain, and at first I was a little scared because we ended up with this MacGuffin contrivance in the film. The Enterprise at the beginning, they have this artifact, and you think nothing of it, and later on, much later on in the film, you find out that the artifact is this MacGuffin that the villain is after. And at first you're thinking, oh, he's just a bad guy that wants to teach Starfleet a lesson, and he's just a bad guy. So I was a little scared, but at the end of the day, with this villain, you really ended up understanding his motivations, and I appreciated that. He also had a good backstory. It was nice to have a villain that wasn't a retread of a villain we had already seen in Khan, and wasn't weak as hell and really horribly portrayed like Nero from the first film. So the characters in the film, I was very happy that we finally got more focus on Spock and McCoy's character. Now, if you're not familiar with the original series, Spock and McCoy, they were just like the most fun thing to watch because of their constant bickering, and that's something that carried over throughout the films as well. And it was always a treat to see them taking jabs at each other. McCoy was always the over-emotional one who would always react. And sometimes I got the feeling that Spock enjoyed it. Deep down, I think Spock loved pissing off McCoy. And we got to see a lot of that. Now, it might be a little strange to see Spock crying in this and laughing. Now, Spock in this timeline, I've noticed, is a lot more emotional than we've ever seen him before. And my knee-jerk reaction is Spock doesn't cry like that at the drop of a hat. Spock doesn't laugh at the drop of the hat, but this is a very different Spock. He's lost his mother. He's lost the majority of his species. And he has a great struggle, as he did in the original series, with his human side. But in this version, I feel like he's allowed himself to be a little more human than in the previous timeline that we've seen him in, because of these circumstances and because of all these things we've seen him been through. I also felt that the rest of the characters had something equally important to do. Chekhov had his moments. Kirk went off and was doing his own thing. Uhura was doing her own thing. Everybody had something of value to contribute to the story. And that's something I feel that this reboot series has done successfully throughout all 3 installments, is having all of the characters be equally important throughout, and not just the Trinity, the Kirk, Spock, and McCoy being the central focus, and everybody else, well, they'll just do their little side missions and side quests. I feel that, yes, while Kirk and Spock do tend to be the main focus of the series, everybody has something important to do, and I feel all 3 films have done that very well. Something else I felt that this 3rd installment did very successfully was there were some moments more towards the beginning of the film where, for some reason, and I can't put my finger on it, the movie felt like the original series. And it wasn't just the use of certain sound effects and brief music cues, but there was something about the montage with the captain's log and showing the various crew members and their struggles and their daily lives in this 5-year deep space mission. So that was something I really appreciated. And another thing that I feel that might be a good draw for younger audiences who aren't really sure about Star Trek is this movie had a much more grand sense of adventure than the other 2. And I think it mostly has something to do with this space station that they visited. There was something about the whole sweeping shots of the city and the whole daily lives. You get this really brief montage peek at the daily lives of the people in the tubes and the cars and all that. And the way the Enterprise flew into the space station under it was like this channel that they would fly through, and you could like see the ship flying by you as you're just walking down the street. It was very nice to see stuff like that. But I think what really made me appreciate this film as a whole overall was, of course, in February of 2015, Leonard Nimoy died. And in this film, I think fans knew that addressing this was without option. There was no way that they were going to be able to get out of this. Ambassador Spock's character had played an integral part in the first film, and a very brief part, but a nice cameo in the second film, Into Darkness. And in this film, I was not disappointed with the tribute that they paid to the Spock character. Young Spock is troubled with the fact that he is staying in Starfleet, yet his people, who are very dwindling in numbers, are trying to rebuild their population, rebuild their culture, and he is stuck on a ship with the Federation with a human girlfriend. Now that conflicts with his logical side, which states, well, maybe I should skip out on Starfleet and start breeding Vulcans, okay, because our population is practically extinct. You know, maybe I should get to work on that, you know. When they hit the space station and they all, you know, spread out and start walking around, he is told about Ambassador Spock's passing. And I thought that that was going to be just a brief mention and we were going to move on. Which my initial thoughts were, well, that's a little disappointing, but hey, we got our Leonard Nimoy and Spock nod. Oh, no. The writers did a fantastic job of incorporating Spock's loss throughout the film without making it feel like a sad, burdening fact that, oh, we've lost this legend, let it bog down the story now. No, what we find out is that Spock has been having these issues, and Ambassador Spock's passing has basically made young Spock's decision for him, but he's still very conflicted about it. I mean, you know, I've kind of gotten into a little bit of spoiler talk, and I don't want to go over the edge with the spoiler talk, but something happens at the tail end of the film that makes Spock make a decision, a final decision. And as a classic Star Trek fan, I'm not gonna lie, I teared up like a little bitch. And it was one of those moments where it took a film that was really enjoyable for me and just bumped it up a couple of notches, because again, as a fan of classic Trek, I have my films. I have 6 movies with the original cast. I have 3 seasons of goofy, doofy rubber suits and really bad fight choreography with really obvious stunt people, but at its core, a really well-intentioned sci-fi series from the 60s. So my Trek is gone, but I still have it. But to have a new series that helps to rekindle that excitement for Star Trek, realizing that a new audience could probably get introduced to Star Trek through it, and to have it respect my Trek the way it did, I can't ask for more in a franchise. You know, you got some reboots out there like RoboCop, which blatantly dumped on the original suit. Yeah, there was a line in there that was just completely like, well, if you like the gray RoboCop suit, well, fuck you. We're gonna make it black is cool. We didn't have anything like that in this, and again, all 3 films seem to have done a really good job of doing what it needs to do in bringing in a new audience while respecting the older audiences. And not every older, hardcore, staunch original series fan is gonna like this. A lot of people have probably washed their hands of it, if only for the fact that, well, it's not my Star Trek. It's not supposed to necessarily be your Star Trek, and that's the point that you might want to consider if you are an old fan who doesn't want anything to do with this series. They are not spitting in your face. They're not spitting in my face. In fact, they're paying, in a lot of ways, a loving tribute to the material that we love so much. And they didn't have to. So overall, I found this film highly entertaining. Some people have complained about certain slow spots at the beginning of the film. I felt like it was character development. I felt like it was a good world establishment and environment establishment. I had no issues with the pacing. I felt each act improved over the next, and it was a really good build-up. I thought it was solid storytelling. I gotta admit, if I were not the hardcore original series and original film series fan that I am, I could easily give this film probably around a 3.7, but because of the nostalgia that they managed to weave very creatively and weave very well into the film, and the respect that they paid, especially for Leonard Nimoy's character, and there's one moment at the end of the film that unfortunately I have to be a little biased, and I do give this movie a 4 out of 5. I know it's a little high, and that is my nostalgia talking. I'm completely willing to admit it. I was very surprised by how much I enjoyed the film. I was very surprised by how well it held up against the other 2 with this new director. I didn't feel like it was over stylized. I didn't feel like it was trying to play to the teenagers who don't give 2 shits about Star Trek. They did a really good job respecting my old Trek and, you know, hopefully continuing the tradition of bringing in that new audience. So, those are my thoughts, and I've rambled once again like I always do, way too long on stuff that don't matter. So anyway, that is my opinion on the film Star Trek Beyond. What did you think? Did you see it? Let us know in the comments below, and who the hell knows what's coming up next, you know? We fly by the seat of our pants, you know, because that's just what we do. We just, you know, we play with our little toys and we just go... Wow, I'm an idiot. Anyway, so that's it for today. We'll see you next time.